Welcome back, Fear Seekers, to Real Fear Files. Tonight, we're diving into the chilling, spine-tingling world of Alaskan cruise ships. I've gathered 9 true and deeply disturbing stories that will make you question ever setting foot on the open ocean again. These aren't just tales, they're real experiences that happen to real people, and the horrors are closer than you think. Before we sail into the darkness, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another frightening episode. Give this video a like if you dare, and share it with friends who love to feel a shiver crawl down their spine. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because tonight, distance won't protect you from the terror we're about to explore. Now, brace yourself, and let's step into the shadowy, icy waters of the Alaskan seas. This is Real Fear Files, and your nightmares begin here. Story 1. That summer, I landed a position on a cruise ship navigating the Alaskan coastline. I worked in the lower decks, handling housekeeping, scrubbing bathrooms, swapping linens, while above, passengers sipped cocktails and laughed. Even so, the steady pay and the promise of travel made it worthwhile. I kept telling myself this would turn into one of those learning experiences people reminisce about later. We got to know each other's routines quickly. Who stockpiled snacks, who skipped shifts, who lingered too long flirting after dark. Down there, the line between camaraderie and intrusion blurred easily. That's how I first noticed Elias. He worked in maintenance, mostly plumbing from what I could tell. Occasionally, I'd spot him in the narrow service corridors. Quiet, with closely cropped hair, pale from days spent inside. His movements were measured, calm, like nothing could ever rush him. Not exactly warm, but not unfriendly either. He was the sort of person you might forget seconds after seeing, only to realize he seemed to appear everywhere eventually. The first real conversation happened in the crew lounge. It was late, probably close to midnight, and I was staring at a cup of instant noodles when he plopped down beside me. No hello, no small talk, just questions. Where I was from, how long I'd been on ships, what deck my cabin was on. At first, I assumed he was being friendly. Loneliness hits everyone on board. But when I kept answers short, he didn't drop it. Instead, he smiled and asked, "Why so secretive?" It wasn't accusatory exactly, but it wasn't casual either. His tone had a weight to it, like he already knew the answer. I laughed uneasily and moved on, unsure how to react. After that, I started noticing him in places I shouldn't have. Near the laundry room as I finished shifts, loitering by supply closets as if waiting. He'd nod when he saw me, smiling slightly longer than normal. Technically, he was following no rules, so I tried convincing myself I was imagining things. Ships do that to you, confine you, make you suspicious. Then the notes appeared. The first was tucked under a towel on my cleaning cart. "We should talk." I assumed it was someone I had accidentally overlooked, so I threw it away. The next day, the same message appeared under my cabin door. By the third note, left in the supply closet, I knew it wasn't coincidence. I reported it to my supervisor. She frowned, promising to look into it, but added that without a clear threat, options were limited. Perhaps it was just a misunderstanding, she suggested. She reminded me to remain professional and avoid the individual if possible. Avoiding someone on a ship? Easier said than done. A few nights later, after finishing a shift on the 6th deck, I returned to my cabin to find the latch bent. I always locked it. Inside, nothing was stolen, but everything felt off. Clothes slightly moved, my toothbrush in a new spot. And the pillow. It carried a faint scent of expensive cologne. Not mine. That fragrance clung to my fingers as I touched it. Sleep didn't come that night. The next morning, I demanded a cabin change. My supervisor sighed but moved me temporarily closer to the kitchen staff. I hoped it would deter Elias. For 2 days, he didn't appear. I even started questioning my own perception. Maybe I had imagined it all. Then came the call. A guest reported a plumbing issue on the top deck, and I was sent to assist the maintenance team. The room was empty, no guest inside. I used the crew keycard to enter. Everything was pristine. Bed made, towels folded, untouched fruit tray. Then I checked the bathroom. On the mirror, written in fog from recent use, were the words, "You can hide, but I'll find you." I froze, staring at my reflection in the misted glass. It felt like the room itself was holding its breath. I stepped back slowly and left, heading straight to security. This time, they treated it seriously. Footage from the hallway cameras revealed someone entering the suite with a guest keycard. The image was blurry, but the silhouette, the stride, it resembled Elias. Cross-checking his schedule showed he wasn't assigned to that deck. When questioned, he denied everything, insisting he'd been working on the lower levels and hadn't seen me in days. Security said they'd keep watch and ensure I wasn't alone during late shifts. I didn't trust it. 2 nights later, at 3 a.m., the fire alarm blared. Passengers scrambled to the muster stations, wrapped in blankets, while crew members tried to appear calm. I was directing guests toward the upper deck when Rosa, one of the kitchen staff, pulled me aside. "There's someone looking for you," she whispered. "Says he's with security, but he doesn't have a badge." I told her to show me, and we moved cautiously across the deck. Whoever it was had vanished before we could see him again. My stomach tightened and refused to relax for the rest of the night. When the alarm finally ended and I returned to my cabin, a small but unmistakable message awaited me. A pair of blue latex gloves neatly placed on my bed. "Maintenance issue," they seemed to say. That was it for me. I packed everything I owned into one duffel bag and went straight to my supervisor. "I quit," I said. I didn't care about penalties, contracts, or paperwork. I was done. At the next port, Whittier, I left the ship without hesitation. I caught the first bus to Anchorage, keeping my head down and avoiding eye contact. I didn't speak to anyone, didn't glance out the window, just stared at the seat in front of me until my eyes ached. Once home, I changed my phone number, told my parents every detail, and filed an official report with the cruise company. Their response was vague. Elias had been dismissed for reasons they called unrelated. They refused to clarify further. Even now, thinking back, the sense of being watched, the notes, the gloves, the mirror, it all lingers. That summer was supposed to be an adventure, a chance to see the world. Instead, it became a lesson in fear, boundaries, and the unsettling reality that some people will follow you no matter where you go. Story 2. It all began on the 3rd day of our Alaskan cruise. Our parents had gone off for a few hours into the wilderness around Juneau on a wildlife tour, leaving me responsible for my younger brother, Rennie. He was 9 years old. I remember the strange thrill of feeling trusted, of suddenly feeling older than my age, roaming the ship with him until dinner. That afternoon, I stationed myself on the upper deck near the massive spiral water slide, watching Rennie climb into its brightly colored tube and whoosh down. His laughter bounced across the deck. He adored that slide. Halfway through his ride, I looked up and noticed the man for the first time. He was leaning on the glass railing, one hand pressed flat against it, the other hanging stiff at his side, completely still. Around him, groups of passengers lounged in small clusters, chatting, sipping drinks, soaking in the sun. He didn't belong to any of that. He wasn't smiling, talking, or observing the scenery. He was staring straight at us. At first I shrugged it off. Perhaps he was lost in thought. Perhaps he was simply taking in the view. My eyes stayed on Rini. He emerged from the slide, cheeks rosy, hair wet, racing toward me with that uncontainable grin that comes only after a ride. I caught his towel as he zipped past. We moved past sun-baked chairs and families laughing at the pool, and I kept an eye on the man. He didn't shift, didn't smile, didn't interact with anyone. He just remained, silently watching. Later, after lunch, I saw him again. This time on another deck, in a corridor lined with cabins. I leaned against a railing, trying to photograph the ocean when, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted him inside the glass-enclosed walkway above the decks. The posture was identical. One hand rigid, the other stiff, just standing there. He didn't speak, didn't approach us. He just appeared again. I thought it might not be coincidence, but I said nothing to Rini. He was having fun, and I didn't want to spoil it with what might be paranoia. That evening, we ended up in the arcade on Deck 8. The neon lights and the hum of machines made it feel like a video game bunker. Rini was at a racing simulator, leaning forward, fingers hammering the buttons. I stayed to the side, scrolling through my phone and trying to capture a decent photo of the ship before night fell. The air inside felt cold, mechanical, humming faintly, as if something was off. I looked up at that instant, sensing a drop in temperature, a sudden chill, like a door had swung open to a colder space. There he was, in the arcade doorway, standing perfectly still, blocking the exit. Same posture, blank expression. His eyes locked on me. I froze. My mind briefly registered, "This is odd," but my gut tightened with dread. Rini turned toward me, showing off his high score. "Mom, look!" he shouted, thrilled. I nodded, but didn't relax. I grabbed his arm lightly and steered him away from the machine. "We're heading back," I whispered. He frowned, brushed his hair from his face, then nodded. We slipped into the hallway leading to our cabin. I swiped our door key at cabin 814. Red. No click, no light. I tried again. Same result. "It worked this morning," I muttered. "Let me try mine," Rini offered, handing me his card. I swiped it. Red again. We exchanged a look. The quiet suddenly felt oppressive. Then I heard it. A faint, deliberate tapping down the hall. Shoe against floor. Slow. Measured. I turned fully. There he was at the far end, half in shadow, arms hanging at his sides, silently watching. My heartbeat spiked. I grabbed Rini's wrist. "We're leaving," I said. He didn't question me. He just followed. We darted into the stairwell. 1 flight, 2 flights down. The metallic scent of disinfectant and echoing steps surrounded us. On Deck 6, I slowed, glanced behind us. Nothing. The corridor lights hummed, empty. I exhaled a little. "Why are we running?" Rini asked, breath ragged. "That man keeps showing up," I replied. "What man?" he pressed. I looked away, unwilling to describe the unnatural posture, the strange face. I said only, "I'll explain later." We reached a help desk near the elevator lobby. No one around. I rang the bell. A woman emerged from behind a curtain. Calm, professional, she asked our issue. "Cabin lock isn't working. Strange man following us," I said, as steadily as possible. She typed in our cabin number. "Your parents reprogrammed the locks this afternoon. You'll need new keycards." I asked if someone could check the hallway. She paused. "Security's busy right now, but I'll log it. If you see him again, Notify a crew member immediately. She handed us new keycards. We lingered outside the stairwell. Neither of us spoke. I didn't want to return to Deck 8. Didn't want to face him or the corridor. I just wanted somewhere safe. Then we heard it above us. Heavy, dragging steps descending the metal stairwell. Slow, deliberate, echoing. Rini froze. I opened the stairwell door to Deck 7 and slipped down. This floor was quieter, mostly cabins, fewer passers-by. The hallway lights flickered once, then stabilized. We pressed ourselves behind a linen cart, blending into the shadows. "Just a minute," I whispered. "Let me see." The dragging steps grew closer, echoing off the stairwell metal. The door creaked. I held Rini tightly, listening for his breathing. Then he appeared. The man stepped into the hallway. No glance left or right, no words, just stillness. The flickering light caught his face briefly, then his head turned slowly toward our hiding spot. I felt a cold dread wash over me. Rini trembled. I covered his mouth gently, feeling his heartbeat hammering into my hand. I whispered, "If I say run, run." He took a step closer. My voice caught in my throat. Then a crew member appeared around the corner, calm, professional. She approached him, said something softly. He didn't react, didn't look at her, but slowly followed her when she motioned. We watched until the hallway swallowed them. I grabbed Rini. "Let's go." We hurried back to Deck 8, silent, careful. The new keycard worked instantly. Relief washed over me as I pushed the door open and closed it behind us. We sank onto the bed, speechless, staring at the door. When our parents returned from their tour, I told them everything. My mom's face went pale. My dad's jaw tightened. They went to security. Later, a supervisor came by. He explained that the man wasn't a passenger. He had snuck on board during the stop in Juneau. No ID, no cabin, no record. He had been caught trying to open a locked maintenance panel. He never spoke, never interacted with anyone. He simply wandered. Authorities removed him at the next port. After the authorities escorted him off at the next port, a strange quiet settled over the ship. It wasn't the normal calm that comes after a storm or a night's sleep. It was the kind that makes your skin crawl, like the air itself remembered what had happened. Rini stayed close to me, almost glued to my side. Every shadow in the hall, every distant footstep made him glance nervously over his shoulder. I didn't blame him. Even I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't entirely alone, that eyes were still lingering somewhere just beyond view. The next day we tried to return to a normal routine. Rini wanted to ride the slide again, and I allowed it, but I stayed on the upper deck, scanning constantly, my eyes sweeping over every figure. There was no one. No rigid hand, no blank stare. Yet the tension didn't leave. During lunch, I noticed small things that felt off. A shadow in the corner of my vision that disappeared when I looked directly. The faint echo of steps in empty corridors. I kept Rini close, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, the residue of fear. But the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. That evening, as we walked back to our cabin, I realized the ship felt different. The halls that had seemed open and welcoming now felt like cages. Even the lights flickering above seemed sharper, harsher, highlighting every corner and alcove where someone could hide. Rini tugged on my sleeve. "I don't want to be alone," he whispered. I nodded, guiding him to the main atrium where crew and passengers mingled. Being around people didn't make me feel safe, but at least it diluted the shadows. The rest of the cruise passed slowly. I kept my vigilance high, avoided deck 8 unless necessary, and never let Rini out of my sight. We stayed near crowds and cruise stations whenever possible. The sense of being watched lingered like a shadow just out of reach, but the man had not reappeared. By the time we docked at our final port, relief finally began to take root. The authorities had handled him, and the ship's security was thorough, but the memory remained vivid. I realized how vulnerable one could feel in such a closed environment. A massive vessel full of strangers, yet it only takes one determined intruder to make every corridor feel threatening. On the final night, I finally let Rini play freely on the water slide while I watched from a safe distance. He laughed, oblivious to the fear and tension of the past days. I smiled, but inside, I carried a shadow of unease. The man might have been gone, but the reminder lingered. Vigilance sometimes becomes second nature, especially when trust is breached in a space you expect to be safe. By the time we left the ship for good, I felt both relief and lingering wariness. I held Rini's hand tightly as we walked to the gangway. Though the immediate threat was gone, the experience had left its mark. An awareness that even on a cheerful, sunlit cruise, someone could slip in, unseen, and turn ordinary spaces into corridors of fear. The ship sailed on, unaware of the disruption it had carried aboard, while I made a quiet promise to myself. Vigilance isn't paranoia, it's survival. Story 3. The cruise had been a birthday gift from my sister, Laurel. She booked it months ahead, thinking we both could use a proper break. 7 days through Alaska's Inside Passage, just the two of us, aboard a colossal ship with spa services, glacier vistas, and endless dining options. Neither of us had ever experienced anything like it, but a few days before departure, Laurel caught a nasty respiratory illness. Fever, lost her voice, completely wiped out. She tried to reschedule, but the cancellation rules were merciless. Her spot was locked in, mine was flexible, so I ended up going alone. I almost backed out. A cruise felt like something you should share with someone, a companion for meals, jokes, or enduring bad karaoke. Still, the thought of wasting the gift didn't sit right. So, I packed and went. The ship was enormous. Not just a lot of rooms, but sprawling, like a floating city block. My cabin had a balcony and a king-size bed, which was comically oversized for my 5'6" frame. Elevators, lounges, a tiny casino, even a small movie theater. Vegas on water. You could spend the entire week aboard and forget completely that you were in the middle of nowhere. Since it was late September, the passenger list skewed older. Mostly retirees in matching rain jackets, slowly shuffling between scheduled activities. No kids screaming, no spring break chaos, just shuffleboard, fleece jackets, and sun-washed smiles. I stuck out, but no one cared. Everyone stayed in their own lane. I kept to mine. By the 4th day, I found a routine. Mornings for walking the upper deck, coffee in hand, inhaling the crisp sea air. Afternoons for reading, napping, or staring at the water through the lounge's towering windows. Evenings were quiet. Dinner, maybe a trivia game, then early to bed. I didn't speak much, and I liked it. The silence felt comforting, like a small refuge in something vast. Except for one person. A man I kept noticing on the top deck, always alone, always pacing. Short hair, weathered face, spine straight like a soldier's. The way he moved, scanning the horizon, it screamed ex-military. I never saw him eat with anyone or participate in ship activities. Just walking, observing, detached. One night, nearly midnight, I was on deck, unable to sleep. Cold, quiet, the low hum of engines far below. I passed him near the bow. Without looking at me, he said, "You know there's something following us, right?" His tone was casual, almost like a weather comment. I gave an awkward half-smile. What you do when someone says something strange but not threatening, and said, "Haven't noticed," and kept walking. He didn't pursue the conversation, didn't call after me, just kept pacing. The words lingered, not for what was said, but the delivery. Calm, like he had already accepted it. Like it wasn't a warning, but a statement of fact. 2 nights later, everything unraveled. The day started normally. We were near Glacier Bay, slowly cruising narrow passages with cliffs and pale blue ice. Passengers crowded the railings with binoculars, cameras, hoping for a glimpse of orcas or humpback whales. I grabbed soup and a sandwich from the buffet. The air was colder, sharper, damp. Around 5 p.m., the captain made an announcement. Ice ahead meant we'd anchor in a safe inlet overnight. Engines off, holding position until morning. It was the first time the ship had been completely still. That night, I went to bed early. Sometime after midnight, I woke to an odd metallic clanging. Sporadic, sharp, irregular. At first, I thought it was ice scraping the hull or a loose fitting on the upper deck. But it didn't stop. I waited, hoping it would pass, then pulled on a hoodie and stepped out. Other passengers were doing the same, heads poking out, whispering, trying to decide if it was routine or something else. I went up 2 levels to the promenade deck for a clearer view. That's when the alarms began. Not the standard drill blaring, but short, irregular bursts. Glitchy, like someone manually pressing the button, then letting go. Lights stayed on, but the ship felt wrong. Shouting came from the forward lounge. I moved cautiously toward it with a few others. No one really knew what was happening yet. We rounded the corner and saw him. The man from the top deck, standing inside the lounge entrance, holding a flare gun in one hand and something small and metallic in the other. Maybe a utility knife, maybe a piece of broken equipment. His face was pale, jaw set, eyes wide but focused, not panicked, just locked in. 3 passengers crouched near the piano. One had a gash on his forehead. The man shouted, "Get away from the windows! You don't see what's out there! They're not gone!" Within seconds, security arrived. 2 guards, batons out, moving without hesitation. The man backed into the room, pulling a woman with him. She didn't scream, just quietly wept, clutching her arm to her chest. She wasn't hurt, just stunned. He kept yelling, "They anchor when we stop. You let them touch the hole. They don't leave. They never leave." A guard stepped forward, slow, deliberate, arms raised. The man fired the flare gun, not at the people, but into the wall behind him. Red smoke, sudden heat. Someone tried to tackle him. I got hit before I even realized it. One moment I was stepping back, the next a sharp tearing pain across my forearm. I stumbled, fell hard. Ears ringing, smoke swirling, chaos everywhere. Someone grabbed me by the jacket, dragging me toward the stairwell. I didn't see their face, only the grip. The next few minutes were a blur. Crew swarmed in. The man fought, swung wildly. Glass crashed. People shouted. Then it ended. He was on the floor, zip-tied, bleeding from the mouth, murmuring about the hole. In the medical bay, they stitched me up. The cut looked worse than it was. 3 other passengers had injuries, bruises, a dislocated shoulder, a sprained wrist. The woman he grabbed? Unhurt, shaken, repeating the same words. "They're here for the hole." 2 days later, the ship docked in Juneau, and police boarded to take him into custody. We were told he would face federal charges. That was it. No press conference, no detailed explanation, just a quiet removal and a delayed departure. Even after it was over, certain details gnawed at me. Security mentioned he had smuggled the flare gun on board. These cruises have airport-style checks. I had a corkscrew confiscated from my bag, and I saw someone pulled aside over a tiny bottle of perfume. There was no way he could have brought a flare gun by accident. For the rest of the voyage, the atmosphere felt tense, even though the immediate threat was gone. Passengers moved cautiously, crew maintained extra vigilance, and I found myself constantly aware of exits, stairwells, and corners. The memory of that man's rigid posture, cold gaze, and the intensity in his eyes lingered in my mind. When I returned home, the relief was palpable, but so was the unease. Even in the safety of my own room, I found myself replaying the image of him in the lounge, the flare gun in hand, the way he shouted about the hole. It didn't feel like a story I could easily forget. I couldn't shake the thought. Someone had managed to breach security, carry a weapon onto a massive cruise ship, and cause chaos. And in the silence that followed, I realized how fragile the sense of safety can be. Even now, whenever I think about that night, I feel the echo of that chaos. The sudden metallic clangs, the red flare smoke, the shouting, and the way the ship seemed to shift from a floating city to a claustrophobic trap. The experience left me hyper-aware of my surroundings, a lesson in how quickly normality can fracture. The cruise was meant to be a getaway, a week of beauty and relaxation. Instead, it became a reminder of how unpredictable the world can be, and how vigilant you have to stay, even when the ocean looks calm and endless. Story 4. I was 27 when I booked that cruise, convincing myself I needed to disappear for a while. The breakup had hit me hard. I had some savings, a handful of vacation days, and zero emotional energy. One evening, I sat at my laptop, typed "quiet cruises," and 20 minutes later, I had a 1-week Alaskan itinerary locked in. Round trip from Seattle, just me among a few thousand strangers. The ship was staggering in size. Not in a chaotic way, but in that surreal sense of walking past a sushi bar, a casino, and a library in the same corridor. It felt like a simulation, floating mall in the middle of the ocean. Most passengers were traveling with someone. Couples, small groups, matching t-shirts, inside jokes. I had none of that. But honestly, I welcomed the silence. I packed 2 books, 3 hoodies, and 0 expectations. By the second day, I had found a rhythm. Mornings on the top deck with coffee, afternoons in the solarium, evenings taking in whatever show the theater had scheduled. Occasionally, I'd chat at dinner. Retired couples, a solo dad with his child, a pair of cousins from Minnesota. Casual, friendly, temporary. There was one person I couldn't ignore. Not flashy, not loud, in fact, the opposite. He looked like he belonged in a library. Tall, pale, buzz-cut blonde, thin silver-framed glasses, often in slacks and a button-up, sometimes a vest. Always composed, never rushed. I first noticed him near the shuffleboard courts, later in the observation lounge, absorbed in a thick, aged book. I glimpsed the title, something about cartography. He radiated stillness, as if nothing could surprise him, as if he was perpetually waiting for something to start. On the 3rd night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the cafe just past midnight for tea or cocoa. He was there, sitting alone by the window, sipping a dark drink. I took a nearby table and scrolled on my phone. After a few minutes, he shifted slightly and asked, "Are you enjoying the cruise?" His voice was calm, deliberate, careful. We talked for 20, maybe 30 minutes. He introduced himself as Harlan, said he grew up in Wyoming but had moved around a lot. I asked his occupation. He said logistics, then smoothly steered the conversation to the ship's peculiar layout. He spoke as if every word were carefully considered before leaving his mouth. He didn't flirt or pry, but he remembered small details I'd mentioned minutes earlier, as if they mattered. The next day, I ran into him by the elevators near the spa. A brief conversation. The day after, near the pool. Then at the theater. By the 5th day, he had started saving a seat for me in the evenings. We never exchanged room numbers. We never made personal plans. It was just a quiet, casual companionship. Then we docked in Juneau. It was our longest stop of the cruise. I went alone early, took the tram up Mount Roberts, bought a necklace from a roadside stand, and got caught in a sudden rainstorm on the way back. I returned to the ship around 5 p.m., soaked and exhausted, and went straight to my cabin to change. On the bed was the usual towel animal, but beside it was something else. A folded paper napkin, shaped into a tight triangle. My first name was written on the outside, neat and precise. Inside, "Sorry we missed each other, unsure." I froze. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but my name was correctly spelled, which meant the person had seen it written somewhere. I hadn't shared my day plans with anyone. I hadn't posted online. I hadn't told Harlan or anyone my cabin number. I brought the napkin to guest services. The attendant was polite but vague, saying he'd have security check access logs, though with thousands on board, he didn't sound optimistic. That night, Harlan was absent from the cafe and theater. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or uneasy. The next morning, I opened my cabin door and noticed a small strip of fabric stuck in the hinge. Dark gray, frayed, about 2 inches long, like it had been torn from the lining of a pocket or vest. Nothing written on it. I reported it to security, and this time they sent someone to escort me back to the room. The guard checked the lock history. Only my key card had opened the door since I returned from shore. Extra patrols were arranged, a note made of the incident. I asked about cameras. Coverage existed only at main intersections and elevator bays, not individual cabin corridors. The next 2 nights, sleep was nearly impossible. I stayed in the lounge until most cabins had gone dark, constantly scanning. When I finally returned, I examined everything. Drawers, corners, nothing. Until the last night. We were due to arrive in Seattle the next morning. I had packed, zipped my suitcase, left it by the door, and left a lamp on. I must have dozed off because when I woke, the room felt off. The clock read 4:47 a.m. I sat up, reached for water. Then I saw it. The chair. Turned toward the bed. Someone sitting there. I froze. I couldn't see the face, just a silhouette. Legs crossed, hands resting in the lap, silently watching. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. I rose slowly, heart pounding, flicked the light switch, and the chair was empty. I ran into the hallway, banging on the neighboring cabin door until someone opened. I told them someone had been inside. They called the front desk. Security arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the cabin. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. Until I lifted the covers. There was another note, this time on cruise stationery. "You looked tired. I didn't want to wake you. I left your suitcase behind and waited in the infirmary until we docked." During disembarkation, I gave my full report again. The head of security asked if I could have forgotten to lock the door. I hadn't. I checked every night. Then he revealed something chilling. No passenger named Harlan existed. No one matching his description had booked a cabin. I moved, changed my number, and never contacted anyone from that cruise again. Whatever Harlan was, he wasn't another guest. After disembarking, I felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering fear. I'd returned to solid ground, to the normal rhythms of life, yet I couldn't shake the memory of that cabin, the empty chair, the folded notes, the strip of gray fabric. The thought that someone had been inside, someone who didn't exist on the manifest, made my skin crawl. In the following days, I replayed every moment in my mind. Harlan's calm demeanor, the way he remembered details, how he appeared and disappeared without warning. The precision of his movements, his stillness. It all seemed deliberately controlled, almost rehearsed. Whoever or whatever he wasn't a typical passenger. I checked my locks obsessively, triple-checked doors and windows. Every sound in my apartment made me tense. I didn't know if I feared that Harlan might somehow track me, or if the experience had simply warped my sense of safety. Every new email, every phone call made me jump. Even months later, when I tried to explain the events to friends, their polite disbelief was a reminder that I had to process it alone. I stopped talking about Harlan publicly. The story belonged only to me. Every time I saw a cruise ship on the horizon or read about a similar itinerary, a chill ran through me. I've never returned to cruising. I avoid large ships, crowded terminals, and windowed lounges where strangers might linger unnoticed. Occasionally, when I browse travel forums or cruise reviews, I catch myself scanning the photos for him, half expecting to see that same pale, buzz-cut figure. Of course, I never do. Harlan, or whatever he was, disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. No confrontation, no resolution, just a series of small, unnerving incidents that left a permanent mark. The cabin, the napkin, the strip of fabric, they remain vivid in my memory, each one a tiny proof that someone had invaded my space, observed me, and vanished without trace. The cruise was supposed to be a week of escape, a temporary reprieve from heartbreak. Instead, it became a lesson in the fragility of control, the thin line between normalcy and intrusion. I realized how quickly ordinary life can be disrupted, and how little it takes for someone, or something, to erase your sense of safety. Even now, when I close my eyes at night, I sometimes see that figure in the shadows of my cabin. Calm, unreadable, watching. And I remember the certainty in his movements, the quiet assertion in his presence. Harlan wasn't a guest. He wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, for a fleeting week, he was real enough to make me fear the ordinary. Story 5. I'd just signed on to a mid-sized cruise ship for the summer Alaska route. This vessel was older, stripped down, modest, a mere 50 guest cabins, a single restaurant, a lounge with worn chairs, and a skeleton crew just enough to manage the mess hall. Docked and prepped, we ran the usual pre-season checklist: engine inspections, safety drills, chart plotting, inventory audits. Standard stuff, but the rhythm of a quiet ship had its own weight. 5 days in, I was placed on the overnight roster. About a dozen of us remained aboard while the rest of the crew bunked in town. I didn't mind the solitude. At night, the ship felt colder, quieter, but strangely calming. My cabin overlooked the harbor lights, tiny points shimmering against the dark water, and I thought a little isolation might actually be restorative. The first 2 nights were uneventful. We played cards in the staff lounge, ate leftover trial meals from the kitchen, and speculated about the tourists we'd encounter during the season. Then Kelly, a steward who usually kept to herself, casually mentioned a storage room on Deck C that seemed to be opening on its own. She shrugged it off as a faulty latch. Curiosity, or unease, made me accompany her to check it. The corridor smelled stale, metallic, faintly like wet rope and rusted pipes. The door was slightly ajar, not swinging, just nudged open. The wind outside was still, no change in pressure or draft. Kelly tugged at the latch. It was stubborn. We secured it with a chain and, reluctantly, decided it wasn't worth a report. The next morning, Mark didn't report for his shift. Quiet but reliable, He was usually the first to show. John, one of the cooks, asked if I'd seen him. I recounted the last time, late the night before, heading out for a cigarette on the lower observation deck. His bunk and locker were untouched, nothing missing. Security pulled footage. No evidence of him leaving, no signs of movement in his usual areas. We scoured the ship from stem to stern. Nothing. The Coast Guard was notified as a precaution. No distress calls, no sounds of struggle, just gone. That night, I sat in the staff lounge reading. Mark's absence gnawed at me. He wasn't a close friend, but he hummed old TV theme songs while chopping vegetables, a harmless, comforting habit. His disappearance defied sense. Around 2 a.m., I went to fetch water from the dining deck. Passing the hall leading to the guest cabins, a sudden, sharp slam froze me in place. Doors were supposed to be secured. The cabins weren't in use yet. I approached cautiously. Cabin 234's handle was crooked, bent as if it had been hit. I opened the door. Darkness greeted me. The room was empty, the bed slightly indented, not messy, just used. The bathroom light flickered, slow and uneven, casting restless shadows. I stepped inside, and on the mirror was a dark streak, long and smeared, like something dragged across it. Greasy, maybe wet, but odorless. I wiped it. It vanished effortlessly. The shower untouched, counters bare, the faint hum of the failing light. I left, uneasy, and returned to the upper decks. Sleep came in fragments. The following day, Luca vanished. Maintenance staff, tasked with checking heating units below Deck B, never returned. Another full ship search. Nothing. No trace, no sound, no indication. At that point, the captain mandated no one sleep alone. We paired up. I was grouped with Kelly. We didn't discuss the recent disappearances. We merely packed our belongings into a shared cabin, silent acknowledgement of the unspoken danger. Just past midnight, a dragging sound woke us. Not loud, just persistent, like metal brushing against walls. Opening the door, we saw a mop rolling down the corridor. Slow, awkward, handle scraping the wall as if it had been tossed and left to wander. Nobody was visible. I picked up the mop. Its rubber grip bore a thick, dark smear, red under the hallway light. Smelling it revealed nothing familiar. No cleaner, no bleach, just dense, heavy residue. We radioed security. They scoured every lower deck room. No footprints, no other signs of movement. At breakfast, the captain gathered us. Officially, we'd dock early for a routine check. Unofficially, 2 crew members were missing. No explanations, only caution. That night, Kelly and I abandoned the cabin, sleeping in the lounge under the constant glow of lights. The quiet was punctuated by occasional shuffles, sighs, or distant clearing of throats. Nobody spoke. I woke at precisely 3:20. Kelly's pillow still bore the dip of her head, but she was gone. Metal clanging resonated above, distant but sharp. I moved toward the dining deck slowly. The kitchen lay silent. Then I noticed it. A metal buffet tray jammed into the warmer, wedged against the back wall. Something had forced it there. Peering behind, a narrow utility chute descended to the storage deck below. Normally sealed. On the ledge, a boot print. My flashlight revealed a single shoe 15 feet down, partially concealed. I tried the radio. Nothing. Dead air. I didn't wait any longer. I raced for the bridge. The hallway outside the navigation room was dark. Motion sensors failed. The console chair drifted slowly, empty. The captain was gone. Comms channels dead, screens flashing error codes as if severed mid-transmission. I retreated toward the crew quarters. Passing the guest cabins again, all doors were ajar. Each room bore faint traces of use. Covers shifted, mirrors smeared with dark streaks in varying patterns, vertical, horizontal, as though wiped hastily by a sleeve or palm. Cabin 234's bathroom light flickered again. I didn't enter. I continued to the emergency locker by the lifeboats, arming myself with a flare gun, a headlamp, and an inflatable personal raft. On the starboard side, I launched into the bay without waiting for clearance, drifting silently. Morning brought the Coast Guard. They found me near Resurrection Bay's edge. I recounted everything. A full recovery team inspected the ship. Power still running, no crew aboard. Blood traces in the utility chute. A cracked lens from Kelly's glasses near the warmer. Half the cabin's mirrors smeared with the same oily residue. Cabin 234 held something else. Waiting, as if the vessel itself had absorbed the chaos. The Coast Guard lingered a while, combing the decks, checking compartments, confirming every hatch and corridor. They radioed up the captain's office repeatedly, but the bridge remained eerily quiet. No crew, no responses. Just the hum of machinery and the occasional creak of the ship settling against the water. I explained everything. Mark, Luca, Kelly, the moving mop, the streaked mirrors, the boot in the utility chute. They listened, eyes widening at details, occasionally exchanging worried glances. I could feel their skepticism, but there was also that thin thread of dread. The unspoken question of whether anyone else would vanish if left aboard. Later that day, when the ship was finally stabilized and secured, I returned with them for a closer inspection. Cabin 234 drew my attention first. The bed had been slightly disturbed again, just a subtle dip, like someone or something had returned. The mirror bore fresh streaks, dark and greasy as before. I pressed my hand against the counter. A faint warmth lingered, almost like a recent presence. My stomach tightened. Security logs were useless. Cameras in the corridors had gaps, blind spots between intersections, and those alone couldn't account for the strange phenomena. Whoever, or whatever, had been moving through the ship didn't need keys, didn't trigger sensors, and left no consistent trace. The Coast Guard questioned me again, and I repeated everything slowly, carefully. They asked if I might have hallucinated, stressed from the disappearances and night shifts. I didn't flinch. Nothing in me suggested this was imagined. I had tangible evidence: the mop, the streaks, the boot, the marks on the mirrors. They noted it down but didn't provide answers. As I moved through the cabins with their team, I noticed small, subtle things that had escaped attention before. A faint scuff on the floor in cabin 210, just outside the bathroom. A chair nudged slightly off its mark in 218. A towel left folded on the bed in 222, but the impression of weight suggested it had been sat upon recently. Every room carried its own whisper of intrusion, a record of unseen footsteps. By late afternoon, they declared the ship temporarily uninhabitable. No one would return until it was fully restaffed and investigated. That left me and a few Coast Guard officers alone on the deck. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the empty lounges and corridors. The usual sparkle of the water looked muted, the reflection fractured, like the sea itself was uneasy. I wanted to leave, to escape, but a part of me couldn't stop scanning the horizon. The events had left me keyed to movement, sound, presence. Every corner, every shadow felt alive. I thought of Kelly and Luca, of Mark. I tried to picture them alive, somewhere, but the image was always incomplete. Like a puzzle missing pieces I couldn't see. That night, I stayed on the Coast Guard vessel, anchored a safe distance away. I couldn't sleep, my mind replaying the corridor lights, the streaks, the floating mop. I remembered the smell, metallic, faintly acrid, the lingering scent of something alive and heavy. I kept imagining the streaks forming again, turning toward me in the darkness. 2 days later, I returned briefly for personal effects, under strict supervision. I walked through the empty corridors once more. Cabin 234 called to me. Something primal in my chest tightened as I approached. I forced myself inside. The room was quiet, the mirror streak-free, the bed neatly made. Yet the air felt heavy, like the room remembered what had happened. The faint metallic tang clung to the corners, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. I retrieved my belongings quickly, noting every detail. The chairs, the tables, even the light switches, all untouched. It should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Something had been here, and left marks of its passage in ways cameras and security couldn't document. The crew never returned. Security teams stayed on for weeks investigating. No further disappearances. No trace of the missing crew members. The ship eventually sailed again months later, fully staffed and operational, but my memory of those nights never faded. Each time I picture a ship, I can't help but glance down dark corridors in my mind, expecting to see that shadowy movement, that glint in the flickering light. I left the area after my final meeting with the Coast Guard, my hands empty, my mind heavy. I changed numbers, avoided travel announcements, never returned to cruise life. Friends asked if I'd been on a scary ship trip. I laughed it off, vague, careful. Truth would have made them question reality. Sometimes, though, when I'm in an unfamiliar building or alone at night, I can feel the weight of something moving through space unnoticed, slipping past the barriers we trust. And my mind drifts back to that ship, the empty cabins, the dragging mop, the streaks on mirrors, the indented bed in 234. I wonder what it wanted, if it was still there, waiting, learning, observing. No one ever found Mark, Luca, or Kelly. The ship held its secrets. Power running, halls empty, traces remaining only in patterns too strange to ignore. I never returned, never stepped aboard another cruise. I tell the story now cautiously, careful not to sound unhinged. But anyone who's walked alone down a dark corridor at night, who's felt unseen eyes tracking their every move, might understand. The worst part is the ambiguity, not knowing. The ship still floats somewhere in the cold waters of Alaska, and I can't convince myself it's entirely safe. Some nights, when I close my eyes, I see the hallway. I see the streaks. I see the faint silhouette in 234's chair, waiting. And I hear, faintly, the drag of something brushing along the walls behind me. Story 6. I was 28 when everything unfolded. I'd booked the cruise alone, 7 nights tracing the coastline of British Columbia before cutting up into the Alaskan Inside Passage. I told everyone I needed a break, but the truth was simpler and sadder. After Nadia and I fell apart, after weeks of coworkers and friends trying too hard to lift my spirits, I just wanted to vanish into a place where no one knew me. Cold air, quiet shorelines, a ship full of strangers. That seemed like enough distance. We left from Vancouver aboard a massive, spotless white ship, 12 decks tall and humming with life. The usual assortment wandered the terminal. Older couples in pastel jackets, parents wrangling sugar-charged kids, honeymooners glued to each other like magnets. I had a cabin toward the bow on Deck 9 with a small balcony and just enough room to exist without tripping over my suitcase. For the first couple of days, everything was ordinary. I kept mostly to myself, reading on the balcony, wandering the observation lounge, taking slow walks around the upper decks with a drink in hand. I wasn't lonely exactly. I just didn't want to participate in anyone else's version of vacation. I noticed him on day 2. Crew member, crisp uniform, fitted vest with the cruise line's insignia. He stood near the elevator bank, hands folded behind him, shoulders squared. At first I thought I was blocking his path, so I offered a polite nod and stepped aside. He didn't move. He only watched me, like he was assessing something he couldn't quite name. I shrugged it off. Until that evening. I spotted him again, different floor this time, by the buffet. Same uniform, same blank expression, same unwavering stare. And still no name tag. Every other staff member wore theirs. His chest was empty. The third encounter rattled me. He was waiting at the far end of the hallway where my cabin sat. Arms folded, body angled directly toward my door. I slowed as I approached. "You need something?" I asked, keeping my voice level. His lips pulled into a slow, unnatural smile. "Just making rounds," he said. His tone was calm, but the stillness in his posture made my skin tighten. He didn't step aside. He didn't look away. He watched until my keycard beeped and the door closed between us. I told myself to stop overthinking. Cruise ships were crowded. Staff popped up everywhere. Maybe he just had a strange way of looking at people. Maybe I'd run into him coincidentally. That's all. But after that night, he was always around. At breakfast, he sat 3 tables behind me. In the gym, he lingered near the towel shelf, never taking one. On the upper deck, while I photographed the glacier coast, I saw him leaning against the railing, just a dark outline watching me. He never spoke, not once. By night 4, my nerves were frayed enough that I avoided any place I'd seen him before. I ordered room service, skipped the live shows, locked both the cabin door and the balcony latch, and slid the desk chair against the glass just to feel like I had some barrier between me and whatever he wanted. Sleep came in brief, shallow pieces. Around 2 in the morning, a sound snapped me awake. Soft, mechanical, familiar. A handle turning. My cabin door was still locked, the deadbolt untouched, but the balcony door stood wide open. The chair I'd wedged in front of it had been moved, not shoved aside, but gently set to the left, like someone had cleared a path with deliberate care. I didn't step onto the balcony. I couldn't make myself. Instead, I relatched the door, triple-checked the lock, and sat on the bed with every light on until morning. When the sun finally rose, I went straight to guest services, voice trembling as I explained that someone had come into my room. I described the crew member, tall, mid-30s, pale skin, buzzed hair, expressionless. No name tag. The woman behind the counter didn't seem shocked, just quietly uneasy. She pulled up the digital key access log for my cabin. "No entries besides your own," she said. I asked whether someone could have crossed over from a neighboring balcony. She told me the balcony walls were heavy steel, impossible to climb unless you were practically acrobatic. "Highly unlikely," she said, "but I'll notify security." I requested a room change. She told me the ship was full. So that night, I repeated my routine. Doors locked, balcony bolted, every light on. I rolled a towel and pushed it under the cabin door so I'd hear if someone tried to force it open. Then I sat with my back against the wall, staring at the door like it might move on its own. Somewhere around 3, exhaustion dragged me under. When I jolted awake an hour later, the first thing I checked was the door. Still locked, still deadbolted. Nothing disturbed. Except the towel. Gone. Not shifted, not kicked aside. Vanished. My heart hammered as I searched the room, under the bed, in the bathroom, behind the curtains. Nothing. And then, the next afternoon, I saw him again. By the spa exit this time. He stared straight at me and smiled. And this one wasn't slow or neutral. It was wrong. A smile that belonged to someone who knew a secret I didn't want to hear. That evening, I cornered a younger staff member near the theater. I described the man, the uniform, the missing name tag. "You mean Alex?" the kid asked. "Maybe," I said. "Who is he?" The kid hesitated. "He's float staff. Bounces between departments. Doesn't really stay assigned to one." "Is he supposed to be in passenger areas at night?" I pressed. "I don't think so," he murmured, shifting nervously. "I can ask someone." But he never did. That night, sleep wasn't an option. At about 2:45, I turned off the TV and stood at the balcony door, watching the black water slide past the ship. Then came a knock. Soft. Intentional. 3 taps. I froze. Another knock followed. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. After a full minute of staring, I cracked the door. A towel, the missing towel, lay neatly folded on the carpet. Placed on top of it, arranged with eerie precision, was a serrated dining hall knife. Clean. Sharp. Waiting. I slammed the door and locked everything I could lock. My hands shook violently. There was no more pretending. He had been in my room. Twice. And he wanted me to know. I called guest services again, voice cracking as I told them I was being stalked by a crew member who had already entered my cabin multiple times. They told me someone from security would come immediately. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. No one showed. By sunrise, I wasn't pretending anymore. I packed everything, my suitcase, my toiletries, even the half-used water bottles from the nightstand. I wanted every last piece of myself out of that room. We still had 2 nights left on the itinerary, but I didn't care. I was planning to sleep somewhere public. A lounge chair in the atrium, a booth in the 24-hour cafe, anywhere with witnesses. I took one last look around the cabin, then pulled the handle and stepped into the hallway. And froze. He was standing right there, directly outside my door. Like he had been waiting. His posture wasn't aggressive, but there was something horribly calm about him. Like a hunter who has been sitting patiently in the brush, knowing his target would eventually step into view. Before I could slam the door shut, he pushed forward with his shoulder, slipping inside effortlessly. The door clicked closed behind him. "No," I whispered, backing up. He didn't shout, didn't rush. He just stepped forward with quiet purpose. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," he said. His tone was almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something thin and metallic, a steel wire, coiled like a sinister accessory. I recognized it instantly. Piano wire. Silent, efficient, designed for close-range control. He took another step toward me. That was all I needed. I kicked the corner of the desk as hard as I could. It jolted sideways and cracked into his knee. He stumbled, not enough to fall, but enough for a gap to open. I bolted through the door, sprinting down the hallway past a couple who jumped out of my path, startled. I didn't stop, not even to look back. I tore down the hallways, across the midship junction, heart slamming in my chest, until I reached the security office. I hammered on the door until one of the officers opened it. "There's a crew member after me," I gasped. "He broke into my room. He had a wire. He's dangerous. He's in my cabin right now." They didn't believe me. Not really. Not until I showed them the knife still in my bag. The one he'd placed on the towel outside my cabin like a gift. My hands were shaking so badly it clattered to the counter. Only then did their expressions shift. 2 officers escorted me back to Deck 9. They opened the cabin door with their master key, gripping batons at their sides. The room was empty, perfectly still, perfectly normal. No sign of him. No wire. No forced entry. Like he'd evaporated. But he had been there. I knew it with absolute certainty. Security stayed silent as they inspected the balcony, the bathroom, the closet, pulling back the shower curtain with professional caution. Nothing. Not even the towel. That night, they didn't let me return to the cabin. Instead, they allowed me to stay in the security lounge, a sterile room with bolted-down chairs, a humming air vent, and officers drifting in and out. It wasn't comfortable, but I could breathe. Barely. 2 officers stayed within sight at all times. I kept expecting him to appear in the doorway, expression blank, hands in his pockets, like none of this mattered. But he never came. Morning couldn't arrive fast enough. When the ship docked back in Vancouver, I didn't wait for disembarkation instructions. I didn't line up behind tourists with tote bags and sunburns. I didn't even look back at the water. I just grabbed my suitcase, walked off the gangway the moment the officers gave permission, and kept going. Straight down the terminal, out past the crowd, into the first cab I saw. "Just drive," I said, not caring where. Only after we pulled away did I realize how violently I was trembling. Later, I made a follow-up call to the cruise line. They told me they found no crew member named Alex who matched my description. No one on the manifest resembled him at all. Float staff, permanent staff, contracted staff, nobody. They reviewed security footage. No evidence of him outside my cabin. No man standing by the spa entrance. No dark silhouette leaning on the upper deck railing. But I know what I saw. I know the way he moved, the way he watched me, the way he entered my room without touching a lock, the way he smiled like he'd been studying me for days. For a long time afterward, I kept expecting to see him again, in the corner of a grocery store, reflected in a train window, waiting at the end of a hallway. I'd jolt at every soft knock on my apartment door. Even the sound of a metal hanger sliding across a closet rod made my pulse spike. I tried to convince myself it was over, that whatever he wanted from me was confined to that ship. But late at night, lying awake in the dark, I sometimes imagine the soft whisper of a handle turning somewhere nearby. The exact sound that woke me the first time he slipped inside my cabin. And sometimes I wonder, did he follow me off the ship? Or is he still on board, waiting for the next person who likes to travel alone? Either possibility feels too real. Neither makes me feel safe. I never took another cruise. I never will. Story 7. I was 34 when it happened. The trip was a gift from my in-laws, a full week along the Alaskan coastline, all expenses covered. They stayed home with the kids, insisting that my wife and I deserved a proper break. I didn't argue. I had never been on a cruise before, never ventured outside the continental United States. We flew into Seattle, dropped our bags at the terminal, and joined the stream of passengers boarding the ship. By the second day, I was surprised at how relaxed I felt. We had a balcony cabin, the kind with sliding glass doors and a couple of small chairs overlooking the water. I remember the slight stickiness of the deck under my bare feet at dawn as I stepped outside to watch the waves slip past. On the desk, taped to the surface, was our printed itinerary. Glacier Bay, Sitka, Juneau, whale-watching excursions, buffet lunches, evening comedy shows poking fun at cruise culture. My wife and I would laugh and roll our eyes together. Everything seemed perfect, calm, familiar, safe. Then day 4 came, and everything shifted. That evening, my wife had eaten only a few bites before going pale, her stomach rolling violently. Motion sickness had finally caught up with her. She went to bed early, bundled beneath blankets and pillows, while I stayed awake. The hum of the engines deep in the hull filled the cabin with low, steady vibration. I had tried a small bourbon, hoping it would help me sleep, but it left me restless instead. I decided to walk. The decks were quiet, mostly empty. I moved across the outer levels, drinking in the cold night air to clear my thoughts. I ended up on deck 9, leaning against the railing, bourbon in hand. The mist hung thickly, and the wind cut sharply across my face, sharpening every sense. And then I saw him, a man standing completely still at the far edge of the deck, facing the water. On any other night, that might have been normal. People stare at the ocean all the time. But this man was barefoot, completely without shoes or jacket. Everyone else on deck was bundled in coats, scarves, gloves. His presence made the mist feel heavier, the cold sharper. I froze. I couldn't make out his features. His face was swallowed by shadow and night, but I could see his outline. Tall, broad shoulders, slightly hunched. He didn't shift or breathe visibly. He simply stood there, staring at the dark water. I watched for 20 seconds, maybe longer, enough to feel my unease growing. I considered asking if he was all right, but before I could move, he turned and walked away. Bare feet slapped softly against the metal deck, disappearing down the stairwell at the far end. I gripped my drink tighter, telling myself he must be drunk or otherwise lost, one of the oddities you sometimes see on cruises. I tried to shrug it off at the bar. But the following night, he appeared again. Same location, same stance, still barefoot. It was around midnight. I had stepped out after dinner, unable to shake my restlessness. This time, I tried to get a better look. I took a step toward him. He moved. Same slow, deliberate pace, same stairwell, same exit. My chest tightened. Repetition had made it strange. It felt wrong. The next morning, I mentioned it to a crew member at the observation deck railing. I didn't demand anything official, only made a casual comment. "I saw a man barefoot by the rail last night." She paused, studying me. I gave what little description I could. Tall, no shoes, no coat, disappearing down the stairwell. She nodded slowly. "We'll check security," she said. And that was it. No follow-up, no alarm, and after that, I never saw her again. Later, I learned her name wasn't listed in the staff directory. By the 5th night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was no longer just a man on the deck. It was the idea that something about this shouldn't exist. I asked myself if I was tired, overworked, imagining things. I walked the outer decks again, from stern to bow, 2 complete laps in silence. My boots thudded softly against the deck. I checked every stairwell. Nothing. No one barefoot. No trace. I began to feel out of place, as if the deck itself had shifted around me. Then, around 1 in the morning, it happened. I was alone on the port side, staring at the sea. The ambient hum of the ship mingled with the slap of waves, then I heard it. A dragging sound. Not footsteps, not a shuffle across metal. It was uneven, shallow, the pull of a single foot across the surface. My chest tightened. I followed the noise with my eyes to the back stairwell the man had used before. The door was slightly ajar, light glinting off its metal frame. I moved closer, heart hammering. The stairwell lights flickered once, then steadied. At the top step was a wet footprint, barefoot, facing outward toward me, as though someone had walked up from below, not descended. I stepped inside. More wet footprints appeared on the metal stairs, irregularly spaced, ascending. They stopped 2 flights below the observation deck. And then, nothing. No prints downward, no exit, just the trail ending abruptly. I didn't go further. I retraced my steps, leaving the stairwell empty and silent. My boots clomped on each step on the way back, every sound echoing against the quiet deck. The following morning, my keycard refused to work. I swiped it 3 times, red flashes each attempt. At the service desk, the clerk searched her screen. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "I don't see you in the system." I laughed, assuming it was a joke. But she wasn't smiling. No record of the room, the booking, my wife's name. She checked my wristband, the card, confirmation emails. Still nothing. She promised to look into it, but that was all. When I returned to the cabin area, the number on the door was different. I knocked. No answer. I tried the key anyway. It opened. Everything was gone. Suitcases, jackets, toiletries, even our balcony chairs. The room looked scrubbed clean, as if we'd never stayed there. I stood in the hallway for 10 minutes, hoping someone would appear, say it was a joke. Nothing. My throat tightened. I tried calling my wife. Disconnected. Room phone? Dead. My heart thumped. I walked the ship, deck by deck, corridor by corridor. Asked staff about me, my wife, or the man from the first night. Nobody remembered. Bartenders, cleaners, attendants, no one knew who I was. We were invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I moved through the darkened corridors until I reached the ship's library, a place I had walked past several times and had always seemed quiet, safe. I sank into an oversized chair and pulled open a magazine, pretending to read. The overhead lights glowed softly. The carpet beneath my feet was thick, muffling every small sound. I tried to convince myself that staying calm would help. Around 2 in the morning, I froze. The dragging sound returned. Shallow, uneven, deliberate. It came from around the corner, outside the glass doors. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. Then it stopped. I peeked cautiously. The hallway was empty. But there was a footprint, a single wet imprint, barefoot, right in front of the elevator, facing it, as if whoever had left it expected the lift to arrive. I exhaled slowly, my hands damp with sweat. I stayed in the chair for a long time, unsure how long, listening for anything at all. Eventually, I left the library, retracing my steps. I found an unused supply closet on the 3rd deck and curled up on the floor, just to have somewhere to lie down. The next morning, I went to the bridge, demanding to see security. The crew refused. "Passengers aren't allowed on the bridge," they said. I asked to be escorted. They promised, but no one came. Later, frustrated, I tried slipping into a crew-only corridor to find answers. 2 staff members confronted me and locked me in a small room below deck. No cell signal. No way out. I sat on a cold bench, gripping the metal handrails until my fingers ached. I pressed my face to the door, calling for help, but no one responded. Eventually, they released me without explanation or apology. When we finally docked, port security pulled me aside. They asked for booking details. I gave them names, passport numbers, boarding passes. They cross-checked with the manifest. There was no record, no cabin assigned to me, no registration for my wife. Nothing. They suggested I might have sneaked aboard somehow, or that the system had been altered. The situation felt surreal. People in uniforms asking questions, scanning screens, checking logs. My answers didn't seem to matter. The return journey was awkward. The cruise line covered our flight home, claiming a clerical error. They promised an investigation, but nothing more. I asked for security footage from Deck 9 around 1 in the morning. According to the company, it didn't exist. And the woman I had spoken to about the barefoot man? According to their records, she had never worked there. It was as though the entire ship had been a hallucination. Except it hadn't been. The engines hummed, the mist hung over the water, the cold cut against my skin. Every detail, every sound, every fear had been real. Yet the crew, the rooms, the logs, they had all vanished from reality. I keep trying to rationalize it. Perhaps there was a procedural glitch, some elaborate maintenance error. But my wife and I weren't alone in thinking we had checked in. My belongings had existed, the balcony chairs had existed, the little touches that made the cabin feel like ours. And yet, they were gone the moment the keycard failed. The barefoot man haunted my thoughts. I never saw him again, but I can still feel the way he loomed in the mist, perfectly still, as if he were part of the ocean itself. The stairwell, the wet footprints leading nowhere, the idea that someone or something had walked up toward me but not down. It's a memory that refuses to fade. Even now, years later, I replay it over and over. The hallway cleaned of every trace of our presence. The quiet library, the dragging footsteps echoing off the walls. The single wet footprint waiting for me by the elevator. Every step I took, every corridor I scanned, the sense that the ship itself had been alive, moving, watching, guiding me through its decks as if I were not supposed to be there. I can't explain why the crew vanished from memory, why the logs showed nothing, why the security footage disappeared. I don't understand how a ship full of hundreds of people could operate in perfect normalcy for days while simultaneously erasing me and my wife from its records. And the worst part? The feeling of being truly invisible, of having no proof that you existed, is permanent. No apologies. No explanations. Only the echo of footsteps that may never have belonged to a human. The mist swirling around the deck in the early hours. The cold pressing against your face. And the inexplicable emptiness of rooms that were yours one moment and erased the next. I don't talk about it much. People think it sounds like a bad dream, a stress-induced hallucination, or some cruel trick of memory. But I remember every detail. The balcony doors, the cold deck under my feet, the smell of the ocean mist, the soft hum of the engines, the drag of a bare foot across metal. Everything. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see that footprint, facing the elevator, waiting. And I know I wasn't supposed to be there. Story 8. I worked in the cruise ship's photography department, sorting memory cards, touching up vacation shots, and helping travelers pose against glaciers and fjords. The job wasn't glamorous, but it came with a free cabin, 3 meals a day, and decent pay. I had run this route twice before, so I assumed this voyage would be routine. Then I noticed him. His name was Clay, a passenger, but he moved through the ship as if he didn't quite belong. Quiet, but not in a friendly, easygoing way. More like he was constantly observing everything with a detached intensity. In crowds, he stood rigid, one hand gripping a coffee or a camera, the other dangling loosely. He wore a tight beanie pulled low over his forehead, and a heavy navy parka that seemed meant for blizzards, not indoor cruise hallways. His skin was pale, almost bluish, as though the warmth of the ship never reached him. I first caught his attention one afternoon in the photo gallery. I was arranging prints from the glacier deck, families smiling, children pointing, everyone full of energy and laughter. Across the room, Clay stood in front of a display, flipping through prints slowly. He wasn't searching for his own photo. I could tell because he lingered on a single image. A family of 4, 2 parents and 2 children, bundled for a glacier hike. The kids' faces were streaked with ice cream and glee, while the parents smiled warmly. He stared at it like it held a secret only he understood. I approached, saying, "Can I help you find your picture?" expecting a normal response. He didn't lift his gaze. "They're still here," he muttered, and then walked off. No explanation, just those words. After that, I saw him everywhere. He avoided the buffet, skipped excursions and group dinners, and vanished during the day, only to reappear at night on the outer decks, even when the wind cut like knives and spray from the sea stung everyone else bundled in layers. He was unaffected by the cold. A coworker half joked, "Maybe he's waiting to jump." I laughed, but it felt hollow. Something about him was off. On the 3rd night, the unease escalated. The ship had briefly docked in Juneau before continuing north through fjords. Around 11:30 p.m., a woman burst into the gallery, panic on her face. Her daughter, 10 years old, had disappeared from their stateroom overnight. She said she had gone to bed with both kids asleep, and when she woke, one was gone. Security scrambled, searching hallways, deck edges, service corridors. Keycard logs and cameras were checked, but nothing. No footage of the girl leaving her cabin, no record of anyone entering afterward. Announcements called her name repeatedly. Silence answered. At breakfast, murmurs filled the mess hall. The dining room felt colder than usual, emotionally colder. Whispers claimed the crew had been covering cameras. Another rumor suggested cabins had been locked remotely. The captain gave a brief address, suggesting a possible misunderstanding or a runaway, but no one believed him. Out in a remote fjord, a 10-year-old doesn't just vanish without a trace. Later that day, I saw Clay again. He stood in front of the same family of 4 photograph. This time I noticed the missing girl in the image, smiling in the center, holding a small cone of ice cream. Clay didn't smile. He simply stared. I asked, "Do you know them?" Without looking at me, he said, "She's not lost. She's just not." His words made no sense, and he didn't elaborate. Bloodshot eyes met mine briefly, then he walked away. I should have reported it, but I didn't. I rationalized. He was strange, maybe tired, maybe intoxicated. Stress of the trip. Yet the tight knot in my stomach refused to loosen. The following night, another passenger disappeared, a middle-aged man at the casino playing blackjack. His keycard record ended at 12:40 a.m., logged at the casino. Then nothing. No exit, no video of departure. The camera nearest him showed the blinking game light still on, chips untouched, chair empty. Staff confirmed the footage showed nothing. After that, the crew restricted access to non-essential areas after 10 p.m. Passengers were ordered to stay in cabins. The ship's mood shifted. Fear replaced cheer. Families began packing for early disembarkation. Rumors spread. Serial abductions, human trafficking. The usual cruise routines, shuffleboard, Glacier View happy hour, souvenir photo stands, continued, but felt hollow, performative. I couldn't remain ignorant. Using the photo system, I accessed internal logs I wasn't authorized to touch. Filtering group photos from day 1, embarkation in the atrium, a welcome banner overhead, people raising drinks. I compared them to the current passenger manifest. 4 people appeared in the photos who weren't on the manifest. Cabin numbers blank, names empty, yet they smiled as if nothing were wrong. Checking the previous voyage's logs revealed the same 4 people in identical positions, wearing the same clothes. And there was Clay. Same parka, same beanie, same rigid stance. present on every voyage, unscheduled, unrecorded. Someone, or something, was repeating. I brought the files to guest services. The clerk didn't flinch. "You weren't supposed to look at this," he said quietly, shutting the laptop and escorting me out politely. That night, I found Clay at the stern. The ship's wake stretched into darkness behind him. I asked bluntly, "What's happening? What about the girl?" He didn't speak at first. Then, quietly, "This ship forgets. It sheds people like skin. Sometimes they fade away, and nobody notices unless you're already fading too." I pressed for clarity. He looked at me with dead, unwavering eyes. "Check your photos. You've already stopped showing up in some." I ran to the gallery, pulled up the latest group shots. Tourists on deck, mountains behind, smiling faces everywhere. I found myself in one frame, third row, behind a couple from Denver. The next photo, same frame, same moment, my image was gone. Not blurred, not cropped, simply absent. That confirmed it. I couldn't continue. On the last day, docking in Ketchikan, I told the captain I was staying behind. No explanation. I stepped off with a tour group and never returned. I relocated to a small town in Oregon, took a print shop job, and never spoke of it again. I was 34 when the cruise happened. It had been a gift from my in-laws. 7 days up the Alaskan coast, all expenses covered. They stayed home with the kids, insisting we deserved a break. I didn't argue. I'd never been on a ship before, not even outside the lower 48 states. We flew into Seattle, checked in, and boarded with a few hundred others. By the second day, I was starting to feel comfortable, more than I expected. Our cabin had a balcony with sliding glass doors and 2 small chairs. I remember stepping out at dawn, the deck cool and slightly sticky under my bare feet, watching the water slide past. The itinerary was taped to the desk. Glacier Bay, Sitka, Juneau, whale watching, buffet meals, evening shows with comedians poking fun at cruise life. We laughed, rolled our eyes. Everything was calm and as expected. Then day 4 arrived. That night, my wife fell ill. Green at dinner, her stomach rebelling, her head lolling to the side. Motion sickness finally hit. She went to bed early, wrapped in blankets, leaving me alone. I couldn't sleep. The ship's engines thrummed deep in the hull. Bourbon didn't help. Restless, I wandered the decks to clear my head. On deck 9, I leaned against the railing, bourbon in hand. The night was misty. The wind bit sharply, drawing my attention. Then I saw him. A man standing near the rail, facing the water. People watch the ocean all the time, but he was barefoot, no jacket. Everyone else was bundled, huddled. I froze. His face was obscured by shadows and mist, but his frame was unmistakable. Tall, slightly hunched, shoulders rigid. He didn't move, didn't breathe noticeably. I stared for 20 seconds, long enough to feel uneasy. Then he turned. Bare feet slapping quietly on the deck, moving toward a distant stairwell. I told myself he must be drunk, the sort of odd you see on cruises. I went back inside, trying to shake it. Next night, same scenario. Same deck, same spot, same posture, barefoot. I stepped closer. He moved, quietly down the stairwell. Alarm flickered in my chest. Something about the repetition was wrong. The following morning, I mentioned him to a staff member near the observation deck. Just a passing comment. "I saw someone barefoot last night. Tall man, no coat," I said. She noted it down and muttered, "We'll check security." That was it. No follow-up, no concern. I never saw her again. Her name wasn't listed in the staff directory. By the fifth night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not just the man, but the impossibility of it. Exhaustion, travel stress, imagining things, I questioned my own sanity. I did 2 full laps of the outer decks in silence, boots clunking softly. Checked every stairwell. Nothing. No footprints, no sign of him. Then, around 1 a.m., I heard it. A dragging sound. Not steps, not a normal shuffle, but uneven, deliberate. Something being pulled. I traced it to the stairwell he had used. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it. Lights flickered once, then stabilized. Wet footprints appeared at the top step, barefoot, leading upward. Oddly spaced. They stopped 2 flights below. No exit. I didn't follow further. The next morning, my keycard failed. I tried 3 times. Red lights flashed. At the front desk, my details were missing. No record of my booking, my cabin, my wristband. Even my confirmation emails were met with blank stares. I returned to the cabin with my wife, but the room had changed. Number, layout, everything different. Our luggage was gone. Toiletries gone. Balcony chairs gone. The space looked scrubbed clean, like we had never arrived. My calls to my wife's phone and the room line were dead. I searched every corridor, every deck, asked every staff member if they remembered us. Nobody did. Not the bartender, not housekeeping, not any crew. We didn't exist. That night, I stayed awake in the ship library trying to feel normal. Around 2 a.m., the dragging returned. A single wet footprint appeared near the elevators, barefoot, facing inward as though anticipating an arrival. I slept in the supply closet beneath Deck 3, just to lie down. In the morning, I demanded security escort me to the bridge. They refused, citing passenger restrictions. Later, attempting a crew-only corridor, staff detained me in a holding room below deck. No cell signal. Trapped. Machines hummed. Metal handrails chilled my hands. Eventually, they released me silently. No apology. When the ship docked, port security questioned me. No records existed for me or my wife. They suggested I might have stowed away, or that the system had been tampered with. I showed boarding passes, passports, the wristband. They verified it. Nothing. Later, I worked in the ship's photo department. I noticed Clay again. Always the same parka, same beanie, moving through the ship like a shadow. He avoided the buffet, shore excursions, and daylight interactions. At night, on the outer railings, he remained unchanged, even in icy spray. One afternoon, a woman ran into the gallery, frantic. Her 10-year-old daughter had disappeared from the stateroom. Security checked logs, cameras, hallways, service corridors. Nothing. That afternoon, Clay was in front of the same family photo. The missing girl smiled in the center. He said cryptically, "She's not lost. She's just not." His bloodshot eyes met mine briefly before he walked away. Another disappearance followed. A man at the casino vanished without trace. Chair empty, chips untouched. Staff confirmed footage showed nothing. Afterward, non-essential areas were closed after 10 p.m. Passengers were confined to cabins. Rumors of abductions and human trafficking swirled. The mood turned fearful. I investigated the photo logs. 4 passengers appeared in group shots who weren't on the manifest. Same 4 people had appeared on previous voyages, in the same positions, wearing the same clothes. And there was Clay. Always present, unscheduled, unrecorded. I presented this to guest services. The clerk quietly said, "You weren't supposed to see this," and escorted me out. That night, I confronted Clay at the stern. The wake stretched behind him. "What's happening? What about the girl?" I asked. He said, "This ship forgets. It sheds people like skin. Sometimes they fade unnoticed, unless you're already fading too." I checked the photos. I had already disappeared from several of them, replaced, erased, as if I had never been there. On the final day, docking in Ketchikan, I told the captain I wouldn't reboard. I stepped off with a tour group and never returned. I moved to a quiet town in Oregon, started work at a print shop, and never spoke of it again. Story 9. I was 33 when I signed on as a maintenance technician aboard the Stratus Dawn, a mid-sized cruise vessel that ran up and down the Alaskan coast from Port Glen to Rothwick and back. Not a luxury liner, but respectable. Around 100 crew, mostly seasonal hires. The pay was better than my portside gig back in Crescent Bay, and room and board were included, so it felt like a solid step up. I figured I'd spend a summer there, save some money, and take a break afterward. Ships like that have a rhythm, most days blended together. I checked pipes, responded to minor alerts, repaired whatever small systems had failed overnight. Nothing glamorous, but I liked the quiet corners, the hidden spaces nobody ever went into. After a while, the metal creaks and echoes stopped feeling strange. They became a part of the background. I shared a tiny cabin on the crew deck with a guy named Lars. He was tall, quiet, ran dish logistics, or something along those lines. Between us, maybe 10 words were exchanged the entire trip. My real companion on board was Omar. He handled refrigeration, so we were on similar rotations. A few years younger than me, sharp, precise, Navy-trained. He wore his uniform perfectly, took drills seriously, and actually read the memos from administration. We clicked instantly. Same dry humor, same taste in dumb inside jokes. Eventually, we started having late meals together and doing walkthroughs in pairs just to break up the monotony. About a week and a half in, Omar began talking about a woman named Carla, who worked housekeeping on Deck 3. I didn't know her personally, though I'd probably passed her a dozen times without noticing. Omar said they'd been spending late evenings together on the crew's sundeck. At first, he only mentioned that she was different, but then he started describing odd behaviors. He said Carla seemed sharp but distracted, as if she misremembered the ship's layout. She'd insist a corridor had one more door than it actually did, or claim a room faced the opposite direction from yesterday. She'd get headaches in specific areas, always the same spots, and she avoided the storage hold on Deck 4 entirely, claiming it made her dizzy. I chalked it up to typical ship weirdness. Spend long enough at sea among identical halls and humming walls, and your mind starts to play tricks. But Omar wasn't exaggerating. He was genuinely disturbed. His usual calm, professional demeanor began to slip. He missed a shift one morning, claiming oversleep. Soon he was skipping meals, retreating to his cabin, locking the door when he used to leave it open. I asked if everything was okay. He said Carla was seeing someone else, but when I pressed him for details, he shook his head. "She says it's someone who's always been here," he said flatly. I asked if it was another crew member. He just stared at the wall, then murmured, "I don't have a name." That night, I woke to him sitting on the edge of his bunk, soaked in sweat. He claimed he'd seen Carla near the Deck 2 loading hatch. She was with a figure lurking in the shadows, but when Omar looked at the person's face, there was nothing. No eyes, no mouth. Just blank. Yet she looked directly at him. "Right at me," Omar said. I didn't know what to make of it. People lose it at sea all the time. Isolation, poor sleep, zero phone signal. Stress does strange things. I told him to breathe, get fresh air at Rothwick, maybe talk to the medical staff. He nodded, but it was clear he wasn't fully hearing me anymore. Then Carla didn't return on board. At Rothwick, during the port turnaround, everyone got a few hours off if they weren't working. She left through the crew exit, clocked out normally, and vanished. Some assumed she quit mid-contract, fed up with ship life. But Omar insisted she never actually left. Her keycard's last ping was near the staff laundry. According to him, she was still there. We checked with the quartermaster. Her last logged swipe was indeed outside the laundry corridor. No exit records, no activity afterward. Security did a sweep. Nothing. No cabin evidence, no sensor blips. Management labeled it a missed scan or badge error. Officially, it became crew desertion. Omar refused to accept it. That night, he pounded on my door, panicked. He claimed he went into the unused Deck 4 hold, the sealed-off overstock area, and heard something. A voice, whispering my name. But it wasn't Carla's. The tone was lower, distorted, underwater-like. Omar swore it came from inside the wall. He pressed his ear to the panel and heard a whisper, tapping, then silence. I didn't believe him at first, but accompanied him anyway to show him it was empty. We unlocked the hold via service stairs. Cold, dim, rusty, stale. Just stacked crates of linens and cleaning supplies. Nothing seemed unusual. I flashed my light over the walls. No vents, no hidden access panels. Omar stood staring at one corner panel. He swore it hadn't been like that before, the edge slightly raised. I chalked it up to memory playing tricks, but he wouldn't move. I eventually left him there, telling him I needed to check a boiler alert. He didn't respond. Later that night, I awoke around 3 a.m. to faint shuffling. Thought maybe Omar was awake. His bunk was empty. I checked the mess hall, the lower deck, the engine corridor. Nothing. Around 5 a.m., I reported everything to security. Omar's sightings, what he'd heard. They searched every room, ran diagnostics, checked logs. Last keycard ping, hallway cameras, walk-in freezer near the mess, all offline due to scheduled maintenance. The Coast Guard was called at the next port. Full investigation. Nothing turned up. They concluded Omar must have gone overboard. I knew he hadn't. Omar hated water. He wouldn't even approach the observation deck's edge, having nearly drowned in the Navy. No way he jumped. 2 days later, I was assigned a solo task. Checking a flickering leak detector near the laundry hallway. Routine stuff. I grabbed my toolkit and flashlight and went down the dim corridor. The area was empty, silent except for the faint hum of the ship. I propped the door open with a wrench, crouched to run diagnostics, then straightened. The door was closed. Not a click, not a sound. It simply shut behind me. I tried the handle. Locked. No override, no radio signal. Just dead silence. The corridor was almost pitch black, the kind of darkness that presses against your ears. Then I noticed it. Breathing. Slow, measured, deliberate. Not panicked, purposeful. I turned. The flashlight flickered. Shadows stretched and contracted across the walls. The breathing grew louder. Inches from my shoulder, a whisper. My name, drawn out like ice across metal. Not shouted, not aggressive, quiet, intimate, deliberate. Then something brushed me. Cold, damp, freezing against my skin. I panicked, threw myself at the door repeatedly. I don't know how long it took, but eventually it swung open. A janitor was standing there, staring at me like I'd appeared from a nightmare. "What the hell are you doing in there?" he asked. I didn't answer. I shoved past him and ran, heart hammering. I didn't go back to that part of the ship. I quit that night. Left everything, tools, uniform, ID, behind. Disembarked at the next port and never looked back. HR called a few times afterward. Messages left on my phone. One email was simple. They understood and wished me luck. I never replied. I'd started that summer thinking it would be just another seasonal job. Fixing leaks, checking gauges, patrolling corridors. It was repetitive, predictable. Then Carla vanished. Then Omar started seeing things he couldn't explain. Then I felt it. The ship itself behaving wrong, small anomalies, whispers, shadows that didn't belong. By the end, the vessel felt alive in a way that was hostile, aware, and indifferent all at once. Looking back, I realize I wasn't alone in seeing it. Omar, Clay, and even passengers like the ones who disappeared. They all experienced fragments of the ship's hidden side. A place where time doesn't always move linearly, where presence is a fragile thing, and where people can exist one moment and be erased the next. That's the only way I can make sense of it. The first time I saw Clay on the passenger decks, he moved in a way that felt wrong. Bare feet, heavy coat in the cold spray of the Alaskan fjords, standing motionless for minutes at a time, as if absorbing the world rather than participating in it. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe he was eccentric, maybe he was drunk, but soon I realized he was a constant, a silent witness, something or someone that slipped through the cracks of normalcy. The first disappearances I witnessed were minor, almost dismissible. The 10-year-old girl from Llano, then the man in the casino. No logs, no surveillance, no trace. Each incident left the ship slightly different, slightly altered, like someone or something was editing reality itself. Crew tried to rationalize it, blame it on procedural errors, missed scans, simple coincidences. But we knew better. I watched the staff quietly cover cameras, redirect passengers, and enforce curfews after 10 p.m. The usual cruise routines, the shuffleboard tournaments, glacier view happy hours, photo stands, continued, but hollow, perfunctory. People went through the motions, unaware that the vessel had shifted its priorities, that it was watching, cataloging, erasing. I tried to prove it. Accessed internal photo logs, compared group shots, checked manifests. 4 people appeared in photos who weren't on the manifest. Identical snapshots from previous voyages showed them in the same places, same clothes, accompanied by Clay, the immovable figure. Something was repeating, or being repeated. I took it to guest services. The man at the desk didn't flinch. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly, shutting the laptop and ushering me out. By the end, I realized you couldn't fight it. Clay, Omar, the vanished passengers, they were part of a pattern, a shipside reality I couldn't touch. Even in photos I'd taken, I started disappearing. One shot, I was in the 3rd row, smiling behind a couple from Denver. The next, same shot, same frame, I wasn't there. Not blurred, not cropped, simply gone. On the final day, when the ship docked in Ketchikan, I told the captain I wasn't returning. I didn't offer an explanation. I stepped off with a tour group and never got back on. I've relocated to a small town in Oregon, taken a quiet print shop job, and avoided talking about it. Writing it down now is almost a release, almost a warning. The ship sailed on without me, unaware or indifferent, just as it had always been. And I know, deep down, it's still out there, moving along the coast, observing, cataloging, erasing. The silent witness at its railings, watching the next group of unsuspecting travelers.